this, right? So if we're doing a second MCP, if I was doing, I just straighten out. So I look, she's got some extension. So if I wanted to measure her extension, I'd use this, right? And then I'd be over the midline of the second metacarpal dorsally, and then over that joint, and then I'd be over her proximal phalanx. Okay, and I'd measure that, and I'd see that she has 25 degrees. All right, so she's got quite a bit of extension, 0 to 25 degrees. And then when I measure her flexion, right, I'd have her flex as far as she could go. So I'd line up over the joint, all right, and then over the midline dorsal metacarpal, second metacarpal, and then over the midline of the proximal phalanx. All right, and I'd look and I'd say that looks like a little more than 90 degrees. And then I'd look at my measurement and I'd say she's got, and it says she has 100. All right, so that makes sense. So 100 degrees of flexion. You can use this one and do the same thing. All right, so I just lay it right over, okay, and then I go like that, okay, and it sticks, which is nice. And this one says 95, 100. This one says 105, right? So maybe I have to do a reliability study on this versus this. Right? Maybe there's one there. Or maybe she warmed up a little bit. So the same thing with the IP. So with the IP, so I can have her flex, all right? And I can either measure this way, over. Sometimes when you work with a lot of hands, what people will do is they'll cut these off. They'll make these shorter too, okay? So when you're in here, it will be a little bit shorter and you won't have as much on there. Or if you're lucky to have one of these, okay, again, we can just measure like that. That looks like it's way over 90 degrees, and when I look at it, it's 95, 100, 105, 110, 115. All right, extension. So when I look at extension, she's got 0 at her PIP, so I don't have to measure that. All right. If I was measuring her DIP, she's got a little bit of hyperextension there. So again, I could measure, I could go in here with this big old thing and measure that little bit of hyperextension. And then I can have her flex. Go ahead, flexible. See, I just have her flex that whole thing. And I can either measure this way, but this is a little big here, so this is much nicer. And I can measure, looks like she's got about 90, maybe a little short. Yep, 80. I'll position her like that. I want to go down the dorsal midline of the second metacarpal. Her metacarpal phalangeal joint is my fulcrum, and then stay down the proximal phalanx, the dorsal middle proximal phalanx. So I go over, line it up, and I have 20 degrees of abduction for her second, or for her index finger or second digit. All right. If I wanted to measure her pinky, her small finger, I could do the same thing. So I want to go down the metacarpal, over the joint, and then the proximal phalanx. So I go like that. And she's got 35 degrees of abduction of her small finger or fifth digit. All right, and then the last is her thumb IP. So we have her thumb IP. It's just like these IPs, right? There's just not as much motion. So I can measure, again, going here, okay, over the IP, and then right there. And I know, I look at it, and I know she doesn't quite have 90, all right, right? So she's got 65, 70.